have James Dobbins with us today. James is a volunteer, I believe, former board member and person of interest as we look at this idea of nutrition, food, and how we manage to use and treat this situation in terms of a food kitchen, a soup kitchen in downtown Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to tell you how much, right off the bat, we appreciate your time and your effort being here today.
Thank you, Ron. It's certainly my pleasure to be here with you and indirectly with your students.
We do appreciate it. Jim, if you won't mind, how about just as opening up, why don't you tell me a little bit about the soup kitchen, kind of its background, its history, what it does, and who it serves?
Well, the soup kitchen grew out of the old Catholic workers' house movement, which would have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it was begun in Champaign by one particular woman. That's all it takes to start a movement, whether the movement's good or bad. We've seen the bad part recently, but this woman, she's still alive. She's still intimately involved in the soup kitchen. She's 96 now and hasn't lost any marbles at all. Sharper than all the rest of us. But she started it in a small house in Champaign, feeding maybe 15 people a day for 5 days a week. And then that got bigger and bigger, and we moved into the basement of a local church, again 5 days a week because the church needed the space on the weekends. And then we started having a food truck in the parking lot that we could serve people sandwiches and coffee on the weekend. Then through the generosity of the community, we had enough money to buy our own building and remodel it for our purposes. And that's just on the edge of the Champaign, like most cities in the north, had a black area and then the rest of the town. And this is on that, just exactly on the border of that old black area, which is not defined like that anymore. And it's so a lot of the people we serve live relatively close to that, either black or white people in that general area. We serve now about 250 people a day, a 4-course hot meal. And each day, and this is really important if you're thinking about something like this, each day is run by a different crew. There's a crew chief and then maybe 20, 25 people who help the crew chief get the food ready, get the food picked up a few days early, set the menu, cook it, serve it to the guests, and then clean everything up. So there's 7 different crews. We operate now 7 days a week. We haven't missed a day in this in the pandemic. When the pandemic started, about March 15th, we went to carry out only. And as we did that, no one was allowed into our building, into the dining hall or anything. I arranged to have a 6-foot-long table stuck out part way out the front door, and the guests line up and come to the table, get a meal in a biodegradable clamshell, and off they go. And that's held still at about 250 people a day.
Jim, in looking at, and by the way, kudos for the effort and the work that's being done within that community, for sure. I'd like to take a moment and explore a little bit. If you could tell me, based on your knowledge, tell me about the people who come to the kitchen. I mean, kind of who are they? Where are they from? What's their story in general?
Okay. One thing I'll just preface my comments by saying that they're all estimates. We don't do any sort of registration of our guests. We don't do any surveys of our guests. But after 10 years there, you get a feel for who they are. Right. They are predominantly male, maybe 3/4 male, about 2/3 African American, a small smattering of Asians, and a growing number of migrants, mostly Guatemalans, and then the rest are white, whatever you call it. And the age, we have, I mean, people bring their kids, and so there's kids down to 4 or 5 years old, but most of the guests are in their 20s and 30s. We have guests all the way to 75 or 80,
Right.
but predominantly, I guess it would probably be in the 30s would be the peak of a curve of the people we serve. They are all poor, all hungry, and they all have a different story. They all, how do they get there? And there's the usual suspects of substance abuse. Um, there's a lot of people have criminal histories that in the old days would prevent them from getting employment. It no longer does, but they don't necessarily recognize that yet, and they've already given up on that.
Mm.
But substance abuse, I think, is really the big thing that people can't handle, and it's probably no more prevalent in poor populations than in middle class populations. But middle class has a little bit better cushion, and it's not so devastating.
Right.
That's about all. I will say that my role, I'm on the board, and my role is I'm in charge of all the assistance that we provide to the guests other than feeding them.
Right.
And so, I mean, I'm involved in that, but like this afternoon, when I get off this call, I'll go down, somebody needs a bus ticket to go to Marion. And for those of you who don't live in Illinois, that's down towards the south.
Mm. Down my way.
And, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we help people that get stuck. They used to have traveler's aid in cities, and they don't. Traveler's aid doesn't really exist. Certainly not in medium-sized towns.
Right.
We help people with if they're lucky enough to get public housing. We have great public housing here, but there's never enough of it.
Right.
We will pay their security deposit because they might wait 2 years for to get on a waiting list for public housing. When they suddenly get a phone call, you've got 3 weeks to move in. They may be able to come up with the first month's rent, but not the security deposit. So we want them off the streets into public housing. I should back up when we're talking about the demographics of the people. Maybe 50 to 80 of them are homeless, and 50 of those would be on the street if it weren't for the shelter in town. We have an excellent shelter that now has a men's shelter and a women's shelter in separate parts of the same building.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who we would categorize as homeless, and the government would, because they're what so-called couch surfing, staying at friends' houses, and not paying rent or not paying much rent. Okay, sorry, I kind of cut you off.
No, that's fine, Jim. Again, I think it's fascinating that you have all of these additional, sort of tertiary services that you're providing. And there's another one I know you do. We'll get back to that in a minute, because I think it's very interesting and something that most people wouldn't consider as necessary in terms of trying to get these individuals that you work with, the customers, as you call them, your clients,
Yes.
trying to do other things for them. I would, though, like to talk about kind of the inside baseball thing here about how the food kitchen works. Where do you get most of your resources to feed people? I would assume, and again, anybody can go to your website and look and see the wonderful job you're doing there. A lot of volunteer work, of course. in terms of people being on board, prepping, cooking, doing all those kinds of things, and then again the facility. But where does 250 meals a day come from? How do you manage that?
One reason I like talking to you is you always have such good questions. So let me back up before I start and remind people that, like a lot of things in social science, the term soup kitchen is pretty nebulous. But for us, it's very clear. It's a kitchen where we feed people. We don't feed them soup in the
No.
during the pandemic, but we do every day. There's like 2 soups when we're open. But the first of all, the funding to support us comes solely from the community. We deliberately don't apply for or receive any government funding. We receive funding for special things from United Way, very generous fundings from them. One of our vehicles for picking up food was donated by Rotary. But we just get contributions from the community. Each of you who are listening to this drives down the road, gets on a freeway, and there's that guy standing there with a sign, homeless, please help. And you don't know what to do. If you help them, they're going to be standing there the next day and the next day. If you don't help them, they may be buried the next day. So there's alternatives like the soup kitchen to help people. We get our food itself comes from a number of sources. We purchase some at way below cost from the Eastern Illinois Food Bank, and they are recipient. Food banks are. That's another sort of nebulous term. It's used in a nebulous way, but it's clearly this food bank is only open to service organizations like ours. When I was living for a while in Seattle, they had food banks. They called them food banks, but people came in. They were like grocery stores, and people came in and got vouchers and shopped. They could come in like 2 or 3 times. That's like a food pantry.
Right.
This is a food bank. We get a lot of stuff from. We order like a week in advance, and we have 3 vehicles that are picking up. We have the advantage here. For those of you who don't know Champaign-Urbana, we have the University of Illinois here, and that has dorm after dorm. They have functions for the alumni, functions for this, and they always have leftover food. And so we're at the top of their list to call, and some of them are just regular. We'll go to certain places every day regularly to pick stuff up. And then finally, for certain things that we're not getting donated, we'll buy at reduced price from distributors in town. Also, we get food. People will bring food by and give it to us, and we never refuse it. They feel a tremendous pleasure in doing that and giving it to us, and we may end up throwing it out, but it's still, that goes on all the time we're open. And then finally, like when I work all day on Wednesday. When I go in, I stop at one of the main grocery stores and pick up bakery goods that they're sending to us. And these are high quality bakery goods. And like donuts, rolls, breads. This is a fancy bakery. And the produce that the produce manager has pulled out, it's not yet unmarketable, but he doesn't want to sell it because by the time it's next day, it's not going to be that great.
Right.
So you add all those things up, and then the cook, like today is Friday, 4 o'clock this afternoon, the cook for Saturday will come in and pull out the food that he wants to use for tomorrow's meal. He may also already start cooking some of it. And then local restaurants will cook just for us and give it to us. Chick-fil-A gives us a tremendous amount of food, and Arby's gives us enough food for a meal. And when we're open, there's a catering service that caters 1 day a month. It brings us a catered meal that we pass out to the guests.
This is just efforts that they do on behalf of their interest to the kitchen. in order for it to help serve its constituencies.
Yeah, I'm not really a kind of a sapsucker kind of guy, but it's really a community effort. Um, right from the money, the food, to the people volunteering, and to the guests that are going there.
Well, it'd be my guess that that's one reason why it's so successful.
Mhm.
Is many hands make light work. Another reason, Jim, one reason I like talking to you is that I have to ask so few questions.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
because
I
you're
talk
so
too much is what you're saying.
no. What I'm saying is that you know exactly what our students are going to be looking for and kind of the information that they're seeking to understand this as best they can. I want to go back, and if I could talk just for a second about this idea of all this logistical work that it takes to make all this come together. And again, one could go onto your website and look, and you've done a very good job in that website of, you've got people pointed out, and here's the Thursday crew leader, and they're responsible for this, and they're responsible for that. I think that's incredible that you can do that and have that. But you said something a moment ago that I really kind of want to key in on, and that is you have producers, agricultural producers that are coming by and dropping off food and making some food, whether that's intentional, whether it's their excess or whatever, available to you. Now, I know somebody's not, got a halter on a dairy cow and dragging it up at the back door. I mean, I realize that's not the case, but how often or how much, let's just say raw agricultural produce, beans, potatoes, lettuce, whatever, how much of that would you say comes in on an ongoing basis to you?
Well, almost all of it. I mean, whether we get it from the food bank or from the grocery stores that we pick up from, it's all coming in that way.
Yeah.
And it's interesting your comparison to a dairy cow on a halter coming in to the soup kitchen. Every year, a guy gives us a cow, and cow's dead, all chopped up.
Well, yeah, he said it comes in pieces. Yes, it's not
But
mooing. Yeah,
we get a pig, we get a cow.
right.
And he doesn't even live. He doesn't live 100 miles from here.
Yeah,
But it's amazing that people. You read the paper, you watch the news, you look at the internet, and you get the basic idea that people are actually pretty crappy, but they're not actually pretty crappy. That's a surprising thing to
yeah.
learn.
Most people are pretty decent at their heart. I'm interested now, and I want to kind of go back and focus now onto some of the clients and the people that you serve. Uh, from the caricature you've made, it's I kind of got this idea, mostly male, middle aged, a spattering of women as well, children at times. You provide them with this meal, but I know that you're also doing something else with the meal itself. It's not only we'll come in and have a plate and what have you. And again, it's not soup. There's soup available, but it's a full kind of meat, potatoes, vegetable. It's a meal. I mean, it's a full course meal. Talk to me about what else you do in terms of trying to provision people with food, because you only serve one time a day, correct?
That's correct. We
Yeah,
serve from 10:30 in the morning till 12:30,
yeah.
and uh, the meal that we serve is actually an exceptionally good meal. The
Mhm.
cooks are semi-professionals. The food is top quality, and we cook things that any one of you would be happy to eat. Before I get to specific answers to your question, I want to just give a quick lecture here. It'd be
Sure.
less than 60 seconds.
Go.
One of the problems with agencies like ours is that you almost automatically are perpetuating dependence, and that's not what you want to do. But as our founder always says, well, we don't want them, if they once they eat, they can still do other things. If they can't eat, then they can't do anything else. But from my perspective, the way around that perpetuation is the assistance that we give to
Mhm.
the guests for other things that will help them either move out of poverty or move into housing. We do a lot to help them get jobs. Um, we get, like just yesterday, someone got a job at a warehouse, and a lot of the local warehouses require that you have steel-toed boots.
Right.
Well, very few people have those sitting in their closet, especially if they don't have a closet.
Right.
So we buy those for them. There's like $80 boots. We
Right.
get them at Walmart. And uh, so we do that. The biggest thing I think I've showed you before, I put together a booklet that has I don't know, 110 different agencies in here.
Right.
And it tells them any problem they have, where there's another agency that they can go to. And sometimes we'll call the agency, we know the people, and we'll say, look, we're sending somebody over to do such and such. And so we deal with housing, helping them with housing, helping them with jobs, and helping them with transportation, I just mentioned.
Right. But I want you to tell me about that really unique thing you do. I think, which is just a mind-boggling that you would have come to this idea, but it's so needful. And that is the idea of a post office, an address.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that. Tell me
Yeah.
about that service that you provide for the people who don't have that.
If you think about your own life, and I'm not talking just to you, Ron, I'm talking
Oh,
to
in
everybody.
general. Yeah.
Well, of course, for students, most of the things are online, but for people that don't live online, they need an address, and they need to be reachable. They need to get, for example, they need to get stimulus checks. Well, there's various ways that happens with our guests. I'll come back to those. Job applications, all sorts of things. They need an address, and we, for about 400 or 500 people, use our address. And so the mail comes every day. We sort it into these big bins alphabetically, and then they come by a special window. Right now, when we're not open, they come by a special window, and we give them their packages. People order from Amazon, and I mean, the usual thing. Except that's the address instead of their home, because they don't have a home. And it's also safer if we get the mail. People have things stolen from them if they
Yeah.
get mail, and the address becomes more or less not permanent, but it's more stable than they are. And
Yes.
so it's easier to catch up with people. I mentioned the stimulus checks. We help them apply for those. If they have a government, like any sort of welfare benefits, the checks will go pretty much automatically into that card. All food stamps, everything is done with sort of pseudo debit cards these
Yes.
days. And it goes onto there, or the checks will come in and we'll give them the checks. And it's just, it's tough to keep up on it because there's so much mail. And a lot of the people aren't able to work. A lot of our volunteers aren't able to work now because of the pandemic, because they are, almost everybody's old. They're retired, and they are, and it's hard to be old without having an underlying condition.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that help with these social services aren't able to come in, but we keep up on it, and it seems to work great for them. As you say, it's really a unique service, and we just consider it a normal thing to provide that for them.
It is incredible in the fact that so many of government communications, government documents, employment issues, and court proceedings, and things
Exactly.
that can be very important, in their lives and what have you. Without a permanent address, you are just in the wind.
Yeah.
And that is such a unique and I think very, very beneficial service.
It now, with the fact with Obamacare, there's a lot of mail associated with health insurance,
Mhm.
and that comes through there.
Yeah.
There's an interesting program that most people don't know about. If you're if you're poor, you can get what's called an Obama phone. They're not really called Obama phones, but
No,
that's how they're
not
known.
the brand. That's not the brand. Yeah, but
Right,
yeah,
yeah, here's one right here.
yeah,
That's how they're known on the street.
yeah.
And if you're qualified for some other sort of government support, you can get that. Or if if you can have a tax form and show that your income is below a certain level. And those phones are mailed to us at, at the soup kitchen, and then we distribute them to
Right.
the,
And that gives that individual actually access and communication to family, to jobs, to healthcare, to anything they might need a phone for.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's another thing we forget so often, that it's the modes of communication and the way society works in general, that people with low resources or very little resources can't access on an ongoing basis, and how far behind the curve that continues to put them. Jim, I want to ask a couple more questions here. Tell me, from a standpoint of the client. Again, I'm asking you to make these broad generalizations, and I know everyone is unique. Everyone's situation and story is different. But from just the general observation that you've made over the years, if you were to point to one or two basic needs that almost all of the individuals that you work with and you service might come in the door with. You've talked about some of the debilitation, the drug abuse and what have you. What would they need if there was something that you could point to and say, if we just had an abundance of, and again, outside of just cash, if we had an abundance of this, or we had some resource here, what do you think would be the most impactful and helpful thing that could be provided or provisioned to people that you work with and you serve?
Well, I think that the thing that's lacking the most for our guests is mental health counseling
Mm,
and resources. Um, Whether that mental health that's causing addiction that's causing mental health,
yeah.
doesn't matter. They need somebody to help manage their lives, and they have people to do that. That will temporarily help people. Okay, here's what's wrong. We can put you into the slammer for a while and get you cleaned up, and then we'll do this, and this. Here's the medication, but they can't handle very many people,
Yeah.
and so many of our people need that. The need exceeds the resources in the community.
What would you say then, from the standpoint, I'm going to flip the coin for you, from the standpoint of the daily bread, the soup kitchen? Uh, what would be the one thing that could be provisioned to you think that would be the most beneficial in terms of you completing your mission as you see it and your impact into the community?
What new resources we would
Yeah,
need?
what would be the one, if you could point to one thing that the daily bread could get, receive, have, be, whatever, to do a better job of meeting the needs of the clients in the community that you serve, what would that be? What thing would that be?
Well, we already have, we already refer people to places that provide those resources, but we don't have what's like in HIV treatment. You have people called navigators, and I think anything that any of the students ever work with, there's people called navigators, and we don't have navigators. I'm the closest to one,
Yeah.
but I can't navigate for everybody, and I know where they need to go, and we can help provide resources to the place where they need to go, and we can get the person um, copy of the page from that book where they need to go, get them a bus fare to get there, but we don't have a navigator that should go with them. And so many times we'll set things up, everything will be fine, and then I'll hear 5 days later, well, so and so never came in.
Mm.
And this, I mean, people. Oh, I'm getting me started on this. People. We're opening up at 10:30 in the morning, and it's not unusual at all to have people show up just completely drunk at
Mm.
10:30 in the morning. Um, Especially after if they're on any sort of welfare, they get the checks on the first of the month. Well, then they'll be certain people, and it's not that they're a bunch of drunks. It's just that they haven't been able to get off of that problem.
Yeah.
So,
No, okay, I can certainly appreciate that. One more question about the delivery mode of the food. You serve there in the kitchen, and again, we'll have a photo up, I think, of the dining area and stuff there. But I know that it's kind of it's pretty tough living if you're eating once a day. I mean, that's better than not a day or any time of day, but
yeah.
that's pretty tough. And I know that you provision around that in a certain way. How do you manage to help people throughout the day in terms of
Okay,
not only eating there but through the rest of the day?
that's an excellent question, Ron. What we give them is, I'll just use the example right now of the way we're serving. They get a clamshell that has a complete meal inside of it, a hot main course, whether it might be spare ribs, it might be steak, it might be sloppy joes, whatever,
Mhm.
vegetables, salad, and a dessert. That's it goes into a bag. They also get a paper bag that has 2 sandwiches in it, orange, apple, banana, whatever fruit we had brought in. And then they can get, if people have delivered extra bread to us that we want to pass out, that we can't use it fast enough, that will be available on a table, and they can take that with them. We get the strangest things. Right now, we're passing out all these little packages of peanuts,
Mhm.
and I'm like, where the hell did those things come? They're just box after box, and so the guy that was working with him said, that's Southwest Airlines.
Oh
They
yeah,
they
because they're not using them on the plane, are they?
you
Yeah,
know,
not right now.
right now.
We
And
got,
so,
we got a warehouse full of peanuts. What are we going to do with them? I
yeah,
know.
yeah. And one of the things we pass out that people absolutely love, oh, you're going to like this,
Yeah.
Vienna sausages,
Oh yeah.
but not Vienna, but
Yeah,
Vienna.
Vienna. Yeah, no, thank you for making it clear. Yeah.
They just love those little things.
Yeah, they're handy and they're high calorie and they're yeah, nutrition's a question mark, but they get the job done. And that's another thing I want to make sure everybody realizes too, is that I know, and again, I have been in the soup kitchen. I have eaten a meal with some friends there in the soup kitchen and found it to be quite adequate and excellent food and high quality, well prepared and very nutritious without question. But this is not what we might say necessarily on American Heart Association's preferred meal plan.
Yeah, yeah.
Your meals are about what we have available and about supplying basic calorie levels to people. I mean, without that, I mean, nutrition is wonderful. Heart healthy nutrition is even better. Organic would be better, better, better. But we're talking about trying to meet basic caloric needs of people. And because of that, then, you said the word spare ribs, and I don't know how many of our students realize what a spare rib is. But I mean, those are delicious, obviously, but uh, not exactly what people would think of as being what we might call it's very nutritious and very dense in calories, but not necessarily always as low fat, low sodium that we may like or we might prefer. And I just wonder if you had any comment about that, about what the mission there is and what you're trying to get done and why it's that way.
Well, you're right that we have to walk a line between giving people food that they want to eat and will give them their necessary calories for the day, as opposed to giving them food that we think they ought to eat. But we have a constant debate about desserts. We give these great desserts. We'll get an apple pie and we'll cut it up and give them a piece of apple pie. But a lot of our guests suffer from obesity. A lot suffer from diabetes.
It's,
And so what are we going to do? Well, they want the dessert. And is it up to us to tell them, no, 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 you're not supposed to eat that? So we give them what they want. Now for example, we get donations of bagels a lot.
Mhm.
Well, we couldn't give those things away. They not
it's just not a bagel crowd.
not a historically bageling crowd.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
But that's important. I mean, that, that again, and I know the students that are listening to this will be at a point of nausea about Professor Madhu and myself talking to them about understanding the need first, get the need understood first. And this is very much that, in the fact that having a truckload of bagels donated is wonderful. But if nobody eats them, they're doing little. If, as a matter of fact, they're consuming resources rather than provisioning for resources.
Yeah.
And that's something you got to take into account when you look across the spectrum here. It really is.
I would like to go back to one of your, I guess it's your last question about what do we do for the rest of the day to help them get through the rest of the day?
Yeah.
And I mentioned that we give them the regular meal, and it's sandwiches, chips, apple, orange, banana, whatever, for a dinner snack. There's also, for people who are homeless, or even people that aren't, but people who are out and about on the streets, there's a thing called a canteen truck that goes around to like from 8 until midnight, that's run by the Salvation Army, and that has certain stops at the bus station, stops over by the courthouse in Urbana. I don't know all the stops, but the guests know where it goes, and they'll have sandwiches, they'll have coffee. I don't know everything they have on the canteen. I don't stay up till midnight, but
Right.
it's at any rate, it's in addition to what we do, and the guests know about it.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So that there is some degree of continuity. But again, I'll point out for the benefit of our students that it takes knowing where that's at and getting to where it's at. And if you're immobile, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're any number of other impediments that might come your way, getting from point A to point B is something that takes effort and work and diligence to make sure you do. Coming to your place every day would be something that would take effort and time, depending upon where people were at. And I think that's something else to consider.
can I interrupt you?
Surely.
Okay. In terms of the services we provide, assistance other than food, I didn't mention that right now we have an excellent bus system in Champaign-Urbana, because each university student, 45,000 students, are charged for a bus fee, whether they ride the bus or not. And so the bus system is excellent. But it costs money for our guests. They're not students at the university. And so we buy them bus passes, annual bus passes, so they can get around to work, to doctor's appointments, to whatever. And right now, the buses are free, mostly because in order to keep the buses running and keep the drivers healthy, you have to board the bus in the back door. And this is the same, I know it's the same with the bus system in Seattle, and probably mostly all around the country.
Right.
That it's free. And of course, the bus system is really starting to hurt, because we're now 11 months into this.
Yeah. Ridership's way down. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one last thing I want to make sure I mention, and
Sure.
that is there's a function that we serve that people don't realize how important it is, and that's as a social gathering place. That these people are isolated, even if they're not homeless, they're isolated in their homes. They don't see people at work. They don't belong to clubs. They don't have circles outside of just meeting their basic needs. And for many of them, they'll come in when we're open. They'll come in. They'll be there the whole 2 hours, talking to their friends, and it's great to see that happening. We have to deal with that. I'll deal with in a couple of weeks. How are we going to deal with crowding? Because we're too successful, and so
Yeah.
I think that we can do that with continuing to carry out meals for those that are socially averse, and still allow the other people in to socialize. So, but again, that socialization is a really important function that we happen to serve, but accidentally.
Yeah, but your facilitation of all the other things, provisions for that as well. Jim, I want to kind of wrap up our time here. A couple of last questions. First of all, if you don't mind, just for the benefit of our students and everything else, what's your day job?
My day job,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm an epidemiologist, a viral disease epidemiologist, and I teach part-time and give lectures.
okay.
The
Good thing
pan-
you haven't been busy lately, huh?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's true. It's true. But it looks to me um, that we're on the downside now.
yeah.
That I just gave a lecture at the university 2 days ago, and I was trying to explain to the students that you never know when a pandemic is ending, because it's going up and down and up and down. But I think that we are ending now. And I think that for most pandemics, we don't really know why they end. This is not going down because of the vaccine. It's not going down because suddenly there are fewer bozos in our population that are out drinking in bars and so forth. It's going down because there's something about the virus that we don't understand.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that the end is near.
That's good to hear, and I take that as good advice coming from you. My final question is a little philosophical, but I want you to kind of put it into your perspective here. What do you see the future of the soup kitchen? The Daily Bread. What's the future going to be like? And I'm not just talking about pandemic and post-pandemic. I'm talking about this idea of the base of needs that exist in the society right now and the mission you all have undertaken to try to do this. What do you see the future being?
I see that we will always be there. There will always be a need for us. And my hope is that it's always a different population moving through the soup kitchen as a stage in life. Excuse me, that they get their nutrition, they get assistance with the other things they need, they get a job. We have hundreds of people who we no longer see anymore. And we know why we don't, because they've gotten a home, they've either gotten into a particular government program, they've gotten a job. Most of these people would really like to work. A
Hmm.
lot of them haven't developed the proper skills for that, but they wish they did and they are able to. These people, I'm always amazed at their pride and the sort of the fortitude with which they live their lives in a way that I could never do. And so, I think these people will hopefully move on up and out,
Hmm.
and new people will fall through the cracks, come through us, and then circulate back up. But I don't see, if I'm reincarnated 100 years from now, I expect to see the soup kitchen still sitting there.
Yeah, that could be very much the case. Jim, I want to thank you so much for your time and all the things that you do, both in trying to keep us healthy and safe, and also in trying to provision through your effort, your work, and your capacity there at the kitchen, all those beneficiaries that you see and work with. Thank you so very much, and again, appreciate your time today, and look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks, Ron. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and answer your questions.